Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, host of the Praxi Pod. And today, despite obviously, hurricanes and, all natural disasters happening, we have actually got together this episode, which it's a miracle, but I'm very pleased to have Mr. Brian Price, Mr. Tony Cassin-Scott. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Andrew.
And on the Praxi Pod, we do talk about apparently something that's quite important and quite topical, you could say, and even more topical as we go into 2026, which we'll talk about in a second, is this thing called data and also this thing called AI. Never heard of it. Anyway, So one of the things we want to do is with the show is we wanted to bring on interesting people who've actually been in the trenches and actually had to do operational roles to make a difference for organizations. And so quite a few months ago, Brian and myself met at an event in London, and then he introduced me to his illustrious superhero partner, Mr. Tony Cassin-Scott, and then the rest is history. So today we're going to be recording this session. We're going to be putting it out on YouTube and all the different social media platforms. But today, welcome. And I suppose to help kick off the session, because I think most people know who I am, is maybe, Brian, Tony, you could just introduce yourself and explain what's been going on in your worlds recently.
Sure. So, hi everyone, I'm Brian Price. I've been working in data, I think, probably before it became sexy. So we're looking over 30 years now. Mixture of sectors, telco, retail, financial services. And I guess for me, I've done the full spectrum of activities, whether that's kind of being a data analyst, being the data engineer, and leading teams, working as part of the senior leadership team, and really looking at great value outcomes. So had some real fun time doing that. UK, Europe, North America, and as I say, soup to nuts on data for me, and ran into Tony quite a few years ago now, who again has a similar kind of background in terms of data. Over to you, Tony.
So I was just thinking about this earlier. 4 decades ago, because I'm slightly older than Brian, I started off as a statistician. But I was advised then, there's no money in data, Tony, get into IT. So I did. And so fast forward, I've had the various roles. My last major role was at Bupa about 10 years ago as IT director there. And then I reignited my interest in data. And something occurred to me during that period is that we've been looking down the telescope the wrong way. As an IT professional, people were focused on the technology, the processes, the flows, but actually data was, it was part of it, and the clues in the title, but actually it wasn't really a major part of it. So I thought, right, let's reset the focus on this, look around the other side of the telescope, and what can we do with data? So what I did do at Bupa is, if you like, I tried to pull it all together. Now, Bupa's a very large organisation. Then it was tens of thousands of people, it still is, across different geographies. So, of course, it's how do you eat the elephant in one piece at a time? But while I was there, it got me thinking about how to put forward the value of data. And we'll go into that later in the podcast. But it allowed me years later to create an approach which Brian and I now use in our day-to-day business. More on that later, but I'll just pause there.
That's cool. So you're like a recovering statistician, is that what you're saying, basically?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I've probably forgotten more than I ever knew, but that's my heritage.
So we're going to talk about R squared and all those kind of all
of that. Okay. Least squares, linear regression, all that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Very good. I will love that. So so one of the things I think that what I was interested was obviously that there's lots of different choices you could say about organizations working with external parties to help them get to where they want to get to. So when I first met Brian and he talked about what you're doing with the data practice, because obviously it's a very busy sector, right? There's lots of choices people have. If I go back to my, when I was a buyer at Tesco or Telefonica or whatever, then it's like big ones, small ones, medium ones, technology-led ones, specialist-led ones. So what was the essence of what you and Brian, Tony, talked about that kind of thought, aha, this is where there's a missing gap in the market. There's a missing, position that you should bring to the market.
Well, there are two parts to this. One is, and again, putting my old IT hat on, it was very much a technology-first approach. The business would have a problem, they throw it over the wall. It's not clearly a technology problem. It rarely is a technology problem, but it's seen as a technology problem. And then you'd be swarmed by people trying to sell you technology, which you'd probably buy and then regret it afterwards. So there was a very much technology first. And when I kind of switched the telescope round, I was thinking, actually, this is more of a technology second issue. What am I trying to do? What's the business outcome I'm trying to achieve? So between Brian and I, we're trying to help clients get value from their data rather than the right technology to use. That's the secondary point. If you like, the technology is the enabler, or an enabler, but it's not the end point. So what we do in our day-to-day work is talk to them about what is it they actually want to achieve from a business objective. Because the first thing we get, we've got this system, we've got that database, etc., etc. It's like, well, that's very interesting, but is it helping you get to where you want to go? The answer is invariably not quite. So what we do, we put together a process that allows them to identify what that value is in very granular details. And then what we do is we apply, okay, this is what you need to do to get there from a data perspective. Brian, do you want to fill in anything I've missed there?
So I think in terms of being able to execute that, one of the things we've done with data practice is to assemble some of the best data practitioners we've worked with over the years. So for us, I think it's all very well and good talking consultancy, but who's actually done this? Who's actually earned those stripes? Who's been in worked operationally with data? Who's worked strategically with data? Who's actually created those outcomes? So we've picked up some of the best data practitioners that we've worked with, let's say, over the past kind of 20 odd years, and pulled them into the data practice. And those are individuals who've worked on strategy, they've worked on data enablement, as we like to call it, rather than data governance. More talks to what you can do with your data, how you can add value, whether it's data engineering, whether it's data science, and more recently a lot more in the AI space, which I'm sure we'll touch on shortly.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you've kind of, I love that analogy, actually. That's a great analogy about turning this telescope around, Tony. It's a really good one. It's because I think I do tend to agree with you that there's been you think about since the .com boom and bust, there's been such a high and the tech companies that came out of that particular, you call it the aftermath. They're very dominant in the news media. They're very dominant in the kind of psyche of everybody, and it seems as it kind of does it. They also, I suppose, it highlights what you just talked about. Also, was that is there an education gap? You've got these execs who are the business guys, but then how technology aware are they? And they need a bit of guidance and trusted advice around. Don't go down that rabbit hole. Think about these rabbit holes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in some ways they've watched too many films. It's too many sci-fi films. I mean, in one way it's good. It raises its awareness, it raises its level, so people are asking about it rather than being sort of someone else's problem. So I think that's good. So the awareness is a good thing. The downside, of course, everyone thinks it's very simple. It's out of the box and it's more mature than it really is. So I'll give you an example. One of the clients I was working with, on board level said we need to go AI. Everything needs to be AI. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Well, we just we need to be up there, leading the way. It was like, okay, these are all very wordy, but I'm not quite sure what it is you want to achieve. So I said, yeah, but in order to get the best value out of AI, you really need to be able to trust the data that's going into it. Otherwise, it's rubbish in, rubbish out. We don't worry about that. Yeah, our governance is fine. Well, I'd already done some analysis of that company. The governance of the data wasn't great and the quality of the data wasn't great. So I said, well, it's not quite there. No, it's fine. We don't want to spend any more money on that. Okay. So I then used an analogy. I said, okay, talk about AI. You're an autonomous vehicle. Yes. What do you trust? Well, I trust it not to kill me or the pedestrians around it. Great. Okay, how does it do that? It's going to steer and brake and accelerate and all of that. Great. How does it do that? It's kind of a moment's thought, and they say, "Oh, AI algorithms will stop it doing that." Okay, yeah, we've got some algorithms that are controlling its motion, right? Is that it? Well, yeah. I said, not quite. I said, how do you think it's making those decisions? It's got cameras and sensors on the car. Yes, it does. Cameras and sensors can see all around it. Yeah, well, that's it. I said, well, no, not quite. I said, those cameras and sensors have got a continuous stream of information coming through. And it has to be the right information for it to make a decision to kill somebody or not kill somebody. So what ultimately do you trust? Oh, yeah, I trust the data coming in. Right. So you trust the data for the algorithm to make the right decisions for you not to crash or die. Yes. Then why isn't that important for your business? Well, I left that hanging there. And then there's like the pennies drop. And you say, yeah, okay, I get it. So there are ways of coaching people and giving them sort of scenarios, if you like, that will kind of crystallize those thoughts, make it a bit real. I mean, Brian, if you've had similar things as well. Yeah.
I think for me, it does go back to the foundational capabilities. If your business is based on really good outcomes, really good customer outcomes, you might be able to run those today. But the idea that you're going to make them more efficient, those processes more efficient, and deliver even better outcomes without understanding what those processes are and what data is fueling that, all you're going to do is turbocharge the existing problems and bring those more into the forefront. So as a result, really understanding what you've got foundationally, starting small with that, looking at some quick wins, fail fast, have a plan B, and be ready to start iterating that. And this is an iterative process. Just getting that across to people sometimes and actually getting the spark when those initial value proof points come out really, really helps, galvanizes not only the execs, but also the team. Everyone's proud about it, and you start seeing far more value coming out. But it really does go back to what's the value you want to achieve, how are you going to do that with the capabilities you have today, and how can you start evolving those capabilities to drive those superior outcomes?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a bit like if you're going to appoint a PR agency, it sounds like the PR agency for AI has got a better PR agency than the PR agency for data, but yeah, actually they're intrinsically linked. Surprise, surprise.
They are, and probably even more so, because if you look at it, a lot of this should be business driven. And at the end of the day, if you start thinking about AI, you should be thinking about data. And not coming to the data team saying, hey guys, it's can you go off and work with that? You've got a bunch of folk in some darkened room in the basement who make great stuff happen. Let's be really clear. We all own data. We should all be passionate about it. We should all be talking about it. We all have a role to play in that, whether it's an enabler of the data function or data science or machine learning engineers, or someone who's a sales director or your CMO. What do you need in the way of outcomes? Everyone should be looking at what they're looking to contribute to this, and be galvanizing around that.
But as a data community, I don't think we always do ourselves favors. So for example, the data governance, data maturity, accuracy is like kind of the grubby end, the boring end for some people, and I get that. But it's a necessary end, and where I think we don't do ourselves a service is if I look at the sort of the teams that run governance and what have you, and I've been part of that myself. They tend to be business prevention officers. You can't do this, you can't do that. And they see it as their role to stop the company doing it self-harm, which is partially correct. But I would argue their main role is to enable the company to understand the risks they're taking with the information that they've got, which is a very different slant on it. So I often, as well as counselling the board, I also counsel the data governance function. So your function there is to enable. You're not there to block or stop. At the end of the day, it's a management call the decisions they make. So therefore, you need to ensure that they've got enough information to make those decisions. You're not making those decisions on their behalf. And I think that's a problem that I've come across in several governance functions is that they see themselves as owning that, and actually, I don't believe they do. So one of the things I'm trying to get over is that they should be there to enable the board, if you like, to cross a minefield. It's a dangerous path. They're the pathfinders. The answer is don't cross the minefield, because that's not the answer. You have to go from A to B, and blocking them doing that will kill the company eventually. So the analogy I use, I like my analogies, is a minefield.
I noticed the analogy. I think we're going to appoint you chief analogy officer actually at the end of this show.
The chief analytics officer, I think, would be a better one, but I'll go for analogy. So if I've got my kind of resources here, and I've got greener grass the other side of a minefield, well, eventually I'm going to exhaust my resources. I.e., the way I currently do things is going to die. That market's going to disappear. So I have to move to a new market, i.e., the greener grass on the other side. The governance function should help me navigate that route to that greener grass. And it shouldn't stop me doing that, because if it does, I will starve and die, and my business will be irrelevant. And we've seen that in past examples where they've actually haven't progressed because they've seen too much of a danger. When in fact, not taking a risk is a risk in itself. So there's the.
But what you're raising, I think, or what I was thinking when you were talking was it's like the organisational design. Yeah. Is there a fundamental flaw in the organisational design? Back to my Tesco days, we had a thing called RACI, responsible, accountable, consultative, informed, and that was the way we embedded change into the business and accountability, and nailed those things like who owns customer, who owns buy side and stuff like that. Is that what you're seeing? Is there still a bit of chaos around that and not clarity? Is that what you see?
I think that's spot on. Yes, that's exactly right. So I think there's sometimes too much power in the data governance function to block things, when actually they should be saying, look, you can do that, but that's the risk you're putting the company at. Are you happy to do that?
But what are the data governance? My question would be, standing back from this a second, would be what are the KPI'd on? What does good look like? What's their measure of success in data governance?
Well, having no breaches, I guess. I mean, there are going to be lots of KPIs around that. I mean, Brian probably more on the ball than I am on that one. What do you think, Brian?
I was going to say. So I think if you look at your data enablement function as a true enablement team, they should be helping the business focus on their most important data assets. Yeah. So the way I talk about it is, you go and you talk to a stakeholder. So tell me what your most important data assets are, so we can make sure they're fit for purpose, for analysis, for execution, whatever it might be. Of course, what comes back is, well, everything's important. Well, of course it is. Let's talk about what the top 100 most important data assets are for the organization. And let's look at how we can focus on those and how we can actually start bringing those to life, making sure that, they're fully curated. So for me, it's really about focusing on the data that really supports the business, the most important data that supports the business, and therefore, how can we actually focus on that? And your challenge
and put a discipline in place around that, I presume, as well. Is that part of that?
Sorry,
and put a discipline around that.
Absolutely. So this is then supported by, well, who's the team that's going to actually support this? Whether that's senior leadership or whether that's someone who's in, for example, mortgage operations, entering data at the coalface. Yeah, they're really working with mortgage applications. They're seeing what goes wrong all the time, and therefore they've got some really good ideas about how you can make that data better. But it does go back to, we all support data. So I was talking at Big Data London. I think quite a few of us were there. It was great for catching up with people. And catching up with some old colleagues who were looking increasingly frustrated by the fact that they've got a number of programs in play, but at the end of the day, their objectives are to support the organization, to keep them safe, regulated entity. Tell me what, I just need to understand what the critical information is for us across Europe, across different operating companies, so we can provide the board and the regulator with the assurance that that's possible. That's what they were tasked with doing, and that's what they were getting frustrated with, is how can I actually reach out across the organization from a point of knowledge I've got this data. Here it all is. Talk to me about what the top 100 are. And that was a genuine conversation we had over coffee in one of those cafes at Big Data London.
Yeah, it's because it sounds like a bit of a, is it like a reboot? Is it a re-education? Because you do have obviously people at the exec level who, transition. You've got some people who, like some places where it doesn't move a lot, and there's some where it moves a lot. And I suppose, what I was just thinking as well when you were talking was about that thing about, this role of, who's on the board that owns it.
Absolutely.
Is that another issue? Because I've seen over the last couple of months or a few months is that a number of CDOs, chief data officers, which was obviously a role that has been recently kind of spawned, I suppose, through this tsunami of interesting data. Transition to new roles a bit after a multi-year tenure. And I don't know why that's happening, but I'm not speaking to them directly. But is there something happening in the market as well around that role? Is it a transformation role, or is it actually a line role? And how do you deal with that? Do you actually have to embed it in the line to actually get this truly embraced? That's that kind of interesting conversation around that.
I think it depends on the maturity of the organisation, where they are on their own journey. So the answer to what you just said is yes, depending on where they are. What I have seen used to good effect is where the board has been bonused and therefore has trickled down through the management tier on data quality. A few years ago, which I thought was quite a smart move. It wasn't a massive, it was like 1%, but it still, all of a sudden people wanted to get, because they obviously want to get their bonus. So the CDO at the time put forward, got the board on board, as it were, to say, look, this is the value of data, all of that stuff, the arguments we've just had just now. They bought into it, said, yeah, okay, we'll put some money behind that and we'll add that to the bonus. And that did over a year. They did meet most of the points. So I think there are ways of means of doing it. It's where you've got people who don't really believe in it or think it's someone else's problem, where there's more of a cultural issue. But I'm seeing less and less of that, to be honest with you. I think time's moved on. I think education has helped. I think people are now realizing that AI isn't just like something out of Star Trek. There takes some work to get there. You have to trust data. So I do think it's a changing landscape, but we're not there yet.
Well, I suppose the thing is, your earlier story about the autonomous car, that's like the FOMO, we got to be AI enabled, otherwise the market may think we're laggards, rather than being, what do you call it, trailblazers, so it's that kind of like dynamic about what do you react to and what do you not react to, and I think as we're probably all seeing in the AI market now, there's kind of like a I remember we were doing a session last summer. I was at AWS Summit in London, and we went on a session that was all about, look at the size of this LLM, large language model. Look how many da-da-da-das it's got. And there's a lead table, and I'm going, oh my God, this is like, I'm going to fall asleep here. And now suddenly, surprise, it's being viewed as a commodity. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and people's moved now to something else, which I'm not going to cover it yet, but. I find it hilarious, this kind of marketing-esque curve we go through, and then it kind of like it just dies down. So, sorry, Brian.
Are we going to end up in the trough of disillusionment?
We're permanently there, aren't we?
I think last summer we ran a survey, an "Are you AI ready?" survey.
Really?
Yeah. Have you got the building blocks in place? And I'm going to paraphrase the results and summarize it. But basically, 90% of the respondents said, "Yep, we're doing stuff." And then we when we analysed the data and asked a few more questions, we reckoned that about 3% are actually in a state to do something about it. So that's 3% of 90%, by the way. So that there's like a tiny percentage are actually in a position to do it. So that the reasons they will fail, they haven't budgeted for it. It's just an idea. They haven't got the people skills to do anything with it. They haven't got the technology. And more importantly, they haven't really thought about the outcomes they want to achieve, which is the most alarming one. It's like, well, if you don't know where you're going.
Apart from that, it's sorted. Yeah.
It is sort of, well, you can see the other, the remaining 87% are going to fail. And we
85 was actually the number. And
85, yeah.
And your challenge here is, why does it fail? At the end of the day, if you've got your strategy right, great. It's actually very, very difficult to get this stuff into production safely. So we've all seen the horror stories about chatbots or agents that have gone AWOL, and the next thing you know is you've got some rather interesting recommendations being made to your customers, which are going to give you kind of best case scenario reputational damage. Never mind anything else can happen to you, depending on what sector you're in. So actually doing this safely and keeping out of jail, for want of a better term, if you look at it, things like the European AI Act is very, very important. And as a result, I think when you come to the acid test, you really want to let this loose. Have you actually thought about the ethics of this? Who's accountable for this particular outcome? And you can't just say it went wrong because the AI algorithm didn't work. Who's the individual who sponsors this? Because at the end of the day, you own it. You think of AI as being your co-worker, and therefore you are responsible and accountable for their outcomes, how they're coached, how their performance managed, the outcomes that they're accountable for as part of your corporate objectives. It's not just the algorithm got it wrong. It's your assistant. How's that working with you? And you look at that.
I'm gonna get a hat. Actually, I might get one of those red hats with the algorithm got it wrong. Maybe that we should do that.
But that's not a defensible answer, is it?
I know. Well, I suppose you raise an interesting thing that I think hasn't been cracked yet, which is validation. Yeah, how do you validate it? Because if you think about the whole traditional system development lifecycle, about what is this new system development lifecycle or change lifecycle, where you go through those stage gates, and actually then you go from from that development into live. It's I mean, I remember we've all switched on new services in large corporates, and it's definitely a squeaky bottom moment, whether it's gonna even when you've done a lot of testing, it's always sometimes that's something that you've got to. And now we've got this thing which is kind of like, I won't say a black box, but it's less it's
predictable.
It's more opaque than maybe everybody would want to do. Is how do you put the guardrails around that? How do you actually manage it?
So I think there's two things around the black box. And I think, my black box conversation was at board level, quite a while ago now. I was talking about a data strategy, and the board was very, very quiet. And at the end of it all, I said, so, Pray, why are you so quiet? One of the Neds kind of spoke up. He said, this scares me to death. I said, what concerns you? Is it is it GDPR? It's around about the time everyone was implementing GDPR, looking at all those fines, 4% turnover, all those kinds of things. I said, what is it? Fear of a breach, fear of censure? What is it? And he went, it's just a black box. It actually scares me to death. I said, well, it's the most valuable, most interesting, and most rewarding black box you can work in. And let me and the team help you understand the value of that. I think if you get over that, you're in a better place. But talking about the fact we all own data and talking about culture, I think for me, some of the dangers around using AI go far wider, Andrew, than just kind of, your DevOps lifecycle and are you ready to release this? Let's just go back culturally, because I was with someone beginning of the year, and we're actually on holiday, and they were looking at their email rather worried because someone had used ChatGPT to help enhance the 2025 strategy plan. The challenge with that is your 2025 strategy plan was out there in the open there. If you ask ChatGPT those questions, you will get it back. As to what's going on. That's how Amazon, Samsung, and other organizations discovered the value and the downsides of using AI, which is you've got to be very, very careful and very responsible in terms of how you use it. And then at that point, it's either do you block it all, or do you actually educate people and say, this is here as an assistant, but you need to tread carefully. It's an interesting, play, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not actually, because also there's the people dimension. So in that new operating model, that the world without AI and the world with AI, you've got to actually upskill people, and you've actually got to work out what are the jobs to be done. Yeah. In that kind of post AI enabled world. So, I mean, we're not, let's not be doom and gloom. I suppose there have been some green shoots out there. There are some, what I can see is more and more use cases where people have been using it in pockets. Obviously, the tech titans are always going to say that they have done everything everywhere and it's all tickety boo. But obviously, you could say there's a reason behind that. So I suppose, I mean, we're now in October 2025, and we're, looking at down the barrel of pretty much 8 weeks to, mistletoe, and snow and all that kind of stuff, especially in the UK. Probably not in other places. Maybe I should like leave the UK and go to some other sunnier clime. But what are you seeing as being the achievements that people have done in 2025? And then what are the things that they still, are going to motor on and work on in the next 8 weeks? And then how do they set up 2026 for being better than 2025 and hopefully not a downturn? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I think what I'm seeing is everyone's talking about the fact that, they've bought the latest and greatest software. They've got Databricks, they've got Snowflake, you name it, Google Cloud, whatever it might be. They've got all that. And then there's this kind of realization, what are we going to do with it? Where's the value? And Tony's probably a better place to talk about this because he actually had the conversation. I'm 8 weeks into my job. I bought all this lovely shiny stuff, and I haven't finished my probation period yet. And the exec now questioning all this money I've spent on nice new shiny kit. I can't remember which cloud-enabled platform it was. I need to create some value outcomes. I've got the platform, I've spent the money, but I need to be able to show that ROI. I need to be able to link into what the business is expecting out of me. Tony.
Yeah. So I won't name and shame, but that's exactly what happened. It's what I saw years ago.
Well, that's real. That's happened recently.
Absolutely. And they bought the technology because it was. There's nothing wrong with the technology, but why have you bought it? What's the point? Why aren't you behind what the board wants to do? The board actually gave this person the money to go and buy it. So I think they're all culpable, to be honest with you. It's not just the person who bought it. The person who gave them the money to buy it is also culpable. And now they're wondering, well, how do we get value out of it? And I was like, you really should have thought about that before.
So they haven't defined a path to value, basically. They were kind of like waiting as a post-purchase decision or post-purchase piece of work.
It was basically, if you bring the person who's a technologist and buys technology, and that's what they'll do. If that person isn't equipped with the wherewithal to say, why are we doing this? Or there isn't someone by their side to say, right, let's work out what the business proposition is before we go and spend a penny. That's exactly what you get. And I've seen that time and again. It still happens, and it's a real problem.
And the disconnect is, put this back into, turn it around, look at it from a board perspective. Well, I can do this using Excel. I can create whatever report it is, whatever, value bridge, whatever it might be in Excel. Why can't you do that in your data team? Is Excel better than the data and reporting team? Why can't I do that? I might as well just say goodbye to you and spend a bit more on Excel.
So, and Andrew, you asked where the focus is. Well, part of the focus of this person, and indeed I've come across others, is, and at this moment in time, economic time, it's about cost saving. Where can they save money? Where can they use the technology to save money? Which is a age-old conundrum, and it hasn't gone away. If anything, the view, if you like, the dream is that AI will suddenly save them lots of money. Well, it won't. Certainly, if they don't know how to do it or what to approach, and therefore there's a bit of faith, I think, from their part. If I buy it, I'm going to save some money, aren't I?
Well, I was going to ask you, because is it a simple? If you're being really strategic, you'd actually have a simplification strategy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can go from many fragmented to maybe a centralized or maybe partially federated or whatever. Or use that as a way to transform your data, as an agenda to transform your data and get it in a good place,
Correct.
et cetera, et cetera. But then also, let me be a bit controversial. Is there a bit of CV enhancing as well? Because in certain people I've seen through my journey, right, they latch onto the latest platform that they may want to have on the CV, depending where they're in the business cycle, and that's going to help them. They believe that's going to help them in their future career aspirations. I'm not saying that would be the case for your example, but I have seen that, and that's kind of like something you've got to guard against, because actually you've got to make the right decision at the right time. And and then because you've got costs. If you've laid out that money, you've got cost burn
for sure
in your OPEX and your CapEx. I mean, it's like, and then I wouldn't want to be the CFO there.
Well, no, because they're the person that allowed them to spend the money. But you're right about the CV enhancing. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but spot on. Where I have seen it are the suppliers. All of a sudden, they've got a .ai domain name, or they've got AI somewhere in their brand, and it's just like
AI ready.
Yeah, all of that. I mean, when did that happen? It seems to be sort of something to stick a badge on, to be part of the bandwagon.
I couldn't possibly comment about .ai extensions. I mean, obviously, I've never seen that before in my life, and will never see that in the future.
No, never.
But you know what my email address is, don't you? It ends in .com. Amazingly, yeah. Maybe .com will become back and become fashionable again. Yeah,
hope so.
The domain extension that we formerly known as .com. Yeah,
that's right. But it is a bit like, it's not just CV enhancing. It's companies who just like adding AI where they can, and it's all a bit meaningless after a while. Especially if there's actually really no AI involved at all, which I think is often the case anyway.
I just got to get it on in this episode. You don't know if you've seen I actually put a LinkedIn thing out about a while ago. Actually, was Old MacDonald had a farm, AIO, and on this farm he has. Sorry, I couldn't miss that opportunity when you just triggered me on that one. Right, sorry, Brian, after you. Yeah.
I was going to say, the other thing I saw on LinkedIn recently was an AI org chart. CEO, let's do AI. CIO, we've bought the software. Head of data, redacted. Head of data governance, not invited. Graduate intern, I built 3 models last week and I can deliver more for you. And I do, I do.
Well, this is a meme. This is a meme that you see.
Kind of, yeah. And I think, I do wonder going into 26 if the view is, well, we don't need that much budget because it's all available out of the box. Agentic this, agentic that, agentic the other. I was at show 2 weeks ago. I saw this agentic stuff. You just press the button and it works. We don't need 200 developers. We don't need 300 people in our call center because I've just seen all this software. It's available out of the box. You press the button. You don't need to write a report. You ask the question in simple English and all the data comes back. If I want to enhance my workflow, I've got some agents that will do that. It's all available out of the box. It's all really easy. So as a result, I don't necessarily need to put as much budget in next year for being able to activate this because I've bought the software, it's out of the box. So, and I think the harsh reality of life is that all these capabilities don't work unless you've configured.
Just a quick question: Is that what you're seeing as a raging agenda point right now? Is that is that kind of bubbling away? It's not quite Main Street yet.
It's bubbling away.
Well, I think it's
demo. It's available out of the box. There you go. Sorry, Tony.
No, I was going to say I think it's slightly more sinister than that. I think there's a lot of shadow AI activity going on as a consequence. I can put my credit card online for $10 or whatever it is. All of a sudden, I've got some agent that will do my work for me, supposedly. The point is, there's a lot of shadow activity going on within businesses now. There always has been with IT and what have you. I think it's easier, and I say it's more sinister.
I bet that never happened in Bupa though, Tony, with you there.
Never on my watch. But I think it is sinister because you don't know what people are doing. They're clearly getting around local governance for whatever, however they can, because it's easy to do their job, they perceive. So I think this is going to mushroom. It's not going to get
Well, I
any.
suppose that's the consumerization of the AI
Totally.
access, isn't it? That's happened. You know, a bit
Totally.
like the iPhone effect of AI.
Yeah.
Which is from a corporate governance point of view or just corporate reputation point of view is a risk.
Well, if you think of end user computing, the use of Excel, for example, for data manipulation, that's kind of uncontrolled already. So you just add another layer of AI on top of that, and as I said, all of a sudden the complications and the implications can become quite extreme. So I think that's a concern, and I'm not quite sure how businesses are tackling that one.
Yeah, I've been a co-organizer of the London Test Automation and DevOps kind of group. We've got about 3,000 people in that group, and my good friend Shashi Jagsap, he's just left Apple recently, and we kind of rebooted it. We call it the AI agentic. What is it? I don't know. London Agentic AI Automation or whatever. He's renamed it. The AI native, I think it is. But that it goes back to my mind about validation, right? If you've got to change from that, you want to go across that minefield. Back to Tony's analogy of getting to the green grass, you've got to work out how to check and balance it before you switch into live service. Otherwise, you're going to have some squeaky moments again, and it's going to be there's risk there, right? So I think my observation with my conversations is people are struggling with the data stuff at the foundation level, which is what you raised, Brian.
Yeah.
They've got to still do that, and that's not going away, no matter what the marketing stuff that's going on. And they've also got this new tidal wave hitting people about the agent stuff, which seems to be being marketed a lot. So it's if I was an exec back in a operating business, there's a lot of things flying around your head that you've got to try and decipher, isn't there? So that's the issue, I think.
It is, and just think about it. A year ago, if you were to poll execs about what they were looking to achieve, it would have been, well, will they do something with AI? Poll them now, it won't say AI, they'll say agentic. That's the speed at which things are rolling on, so it'd be interesting to see where it is in 12 months' time, whether or not any of that value is being delivered and what the latest buzzword is. But as you say, it's down to the foundational capabilities, really what you need to achieve. That's got to be the key. Those are the two key ingredients to go into that kind of decisioning process.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's a bit like the princess and the frog, isn't it? It's like there's lots of new princesses come along every year, but it's actually you've got to eat the frog, and get that sorted out, which is the hard yards, I suppose. And
I think the problem is there are lots of solutions looking for problems right now, and people get bought into these shiny solutions, and we need agentic AI, and because everyone else is doing it, it's this FOMO bit. And then all of a sudden they've got these tools which they don't know what to do. More worryingly, maybe misusing them as well for dubious outcomes. And one of the things we've developed, Brian and I, is a data navigator, we call it. What that does, it means is business value first. What are the outcomes you want to achieve? Let's be really clear about that before you look at any technologies at all. Be really clear about that. Right. The second thing is, how are you geared up to deliver that? What projects, initiatives do you have in place to make those real? The third one is, what skills and capabilities do your people have to deliver those objectives? And with our data hats on, we'll look at data skills, but obviously a whole load of other skills in the mix that people need. And then finally, what is the enabling technology, that whether it be agentic AI or something else, to allow those people with the right skills involved in the right initiatives to deliver those outcomes? It's a very simple 4-stage process, but often people go, let's jump to the technology because it's the easier one, in truth, because someone's just rung me up or I've seen something at some show and I'll get that. And then they'll jump to the outcome they want to achieve. But the link between the two often is a bit vague. And that example that we spoke about earlier is exactly what happened there.
Yeah, and I think this is why I wanted you to come on the show, because I think it's just discussing what you're seeing, and also I suppose reinforcing the point that be careful, right? Be careful.
Yeah.
Be careful what you get involved in, and also get the right support and advice. And what I celebrate with what you're doing with the data practice is because you're getting together experienced people who have been down that track before and have actually delivered transformation before. So it's not as though you've got a different value proposition to a number of other people in the market. And obviously the whole consulting market is being also retransformed itself, isn't it, with the whole AI tsunami wave as well. So I suppose it's that thing about the heady days of when I was on the receiving end of certain organisations, which I won't mention on this podcast, was always kind of entertaining. Send for more troops. So it's small is beautiful. Yeah,
it is.
Small and impactful is beautiful.
Absolutely. I think I've been there myself at budget planning time. You're figuring out what your budget looks like. You've got a short list of vendors you want to go and talk to with all those enabling technology first ideas you've got. And the vendor comes in and says, yes, that's great. Here we go. Here's the bill for the technology. And we also need to introduce you to our partners who are going to do all the implementation. That's going to cost you as more than the software is going to cost you. Small is beautiful. Prove the value. Start small. Fail fast. Have a plan B. Value.
Yeah, and then obviously, if you're on the receiving end of that, you've got to then work out how you navigate that, because otherwise that could be kind of a challenge in the future. But anyway, to finish on a positive note, so I mean, let's think about what if an exec listening to this episode today, on the way to work, in the gym, doing their press ups, whatever, trying to get data fit, as Roberto Maranco, my very esteemed advisory board member, just put his new book out, the Data Excellence, talking about the Keep Fit. I think he was talking about the data personal trainer he's got. Have you read that book yet? It's a very good book. What would be the one takeaway that you think an exec should listen to from both yourselves? What would you say? What would be the one line of advice that they should take into 2026 or take as a kind of a must do between now and Christmas? Any thoughts?
Yeah. I would think about what value do you want to get out of your data, and therefore think very clearly about the business objectives you want to deliver and how data can help you get there. That would be my one-liner. Brian?
I'd say, and this is probably contrary to what most consultancies would say, start small. I said earlier, prove the value, scale out from there. Take some proof points. Take some representative processes, outcomes. Prove the value around that. Galvanize that. And move on from there. Don't go big. Start small, and then start scaling it up. If you can prove it and then scale it.
Okay, cool. That's two really good ones. I mean, obviously, my working for Praxi, obviously mine would be start huge, yeah, and then no, I'm joking. Let's just no, I'm joking. Anyway, I think I think we're trying to be very Praxi is based on the praxis, which is the Greek word for being practical, actually having tools to be practical. So we're very much aligned to, I think, what you guys are working on, because you and the team, because I think you need there's enough water going on the bridge, and people need to realise that you need to get the right team around you to get what you want to deliver. And things are getting more complex. They're not, things are getting more complex, but there's a bigger opportunity with it, I think. So if you can navigate that in the right way in 2026, then you're going to be in a great place. And I think making the most, it's scary. Last Friday, it was 75 days to 1st of January, which I think is absolutely nuts when you think about it. Yeah. It really focuses the mind about what organizations should be thinking about in this next 8 weeks to get really ready for, some really massive, valuable, impactful things in 2026. So thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Mr. Brian Price, Mr. Tony Cassin-Scott. And if anybody wants to know any more about what you guys do and, see how do they find you? What's the best way to locate you?
The datapractice.co.uk. You can find us via LinkedIn. And we're not those shy retiring data people that hide in a corner. We're out there. But yeah, start with the website and take it from there.
Cool. Okay, that was great. So that's Brian and Tony from the Data Practice, and that was Andrew Turner, host of the Praxi Pod. See you. Actually, we're going to be seeing you a bit later because we've got another weekly live stream with Mr. Andrew Arn, our founder and CEO, live from San Francisco. So catch you later. Ciao, ciao.
Tune in later.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks, Tony.
Bye.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye.